Kadosh, Boker Or. I wanted to share with you an incredible idea that has to do with Hanuka, but it's the connection also with Parashat Vayeshev. But it's going to be as follows. What is the connection between Hanuka and Yaakov Avinu and Yosef Hatzadik? We're going to see later on, right, that it's the Pri Tzaddik brings down the name of the Shla Kadosh. That the Shla Kadosh says that it always happens, the Hanukkah will always be during the parashiot that we read about Yosef Hatzadik. Always, right? This is a beautiful Shla Kadosh, where the Shla Kadosh comes and he says, U'sever Shla itat parashiot vayeshev miketz and vayigash are always speaking about Yosef Hatzadik, and these parashiot will always fall Hanukkah, whether beforehand, afterhand, in the middle. Obviously, there has to be some connection. Sometimes falls in Vayeshev, Sof Hanukkah is Vayigash, sometimes it's going to be in Miketz, Hanukkah, sometimes it's... What's the connection, obviously? There has to be something. So we're going to try to speak about, delve a little bit deep today, into understanding the concepts behind Hanukkah, Yosef Hatzadik, and Yaakov Avinu. Okay, so let's start. Or HaChaim HaKadosh in Parashat Tesaveh. The Or HaChaim HaKadosh comes and he says, B'derech Remez, I'm going to explain to you a ma'amar which was brought in the Zohar Chadash, that there were 4 exiles amongst Bnei Yisrael. We know that we have the Babylonians, they destroyed the first Bet HaMikdash, right? And they took us into Galut Bavel. Afterwards, we had the Galus of the Persians, right? Paras and Madai. And then afterwards, we had Galut Yavan, which was the Greeks. That was Hanukkah. And then the last one is Edom, that they destroyed the second Bet HaMikdash, and we're still in Galut Edom. There's a lot about to speak about. What about Galut Ishmael? Is that a 5th one? Is it part of the 4th one? Is it not even part of them? It's all part. There's a whole question about that. But for sure, right? But for sure, though, very, very important, right? Whenever we're talking about this concept, right? We see this, that there's 4 Galuyot. Galut Arishon, they were Nigal, they were redeemed in the Zechut of Avraham Avinu Alav Shalom. So the first one, Avraham. Second one, Yitzhak Avinu Alav Shalom. Third one, Yaakov. The 4th one in the Zechut of Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's why this Galut is taking so long, because as long as we're not learning enough Torah, Mitzvah, Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't want to redeem us. So since the last Galut is going to be for Moshe, Moshe is always Torah. So that's why now in our generations, we need more Torah than all the other previous generations. Because if it wasn't that there's enough learning of Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't want to redeem us. And it's in his merit that we're going to be redeemed from the 4th Galut, which is basically the Galut of Edom, right? Of the Romans, which we're in till today. Okay? Vayashkem Yaakov baboker, vayikach et ha'even asher sam merashotav. Yeah, he comes and he says like this. He says like this. He says, right, as follows. Yaakov Avinu wakes up early in the morning and he takes the stone which he placed by his head. You remember this is by the dream. Vayasem otam atzeva, he makes a monument. Vayitzok shemen al rosha, and he's going to come and he's going to put oil on top of it. Where does this oil exactly come from exactly? So he says like this. He says, this is in the Yama Talmud. Matzati besefer bikat Shmuel, in the name of the Shach. I saw in the Sefer bikat Shmuel in the name of the Shach. And he says like this, that oil that Yaakov Avinu used, nitgala lo oto apach, was this oil of the jug, and all the miracles happened through there. They anointed all the jugs of all the utensils of the Bet HaMikdash. All the kings were anointed with that oil. This was the Kad Hashem that Eliyahu Navi used, that they kept on filling up all the jugs of oil, and it never finished. And that was the same jug which was used for the Bnei Hashmonai. I once, if you remember, we brought down in the Dvar Torah, this was actually the jug which was in his staff, because some people say that he had oil in his staff. He used to keep oil in the staff, in the cane that he used to use. But other people say that it was actually the Pach Hashem that he went back to get, and the Sarosh Esav came to attack him. You remember we mentioned last week's parasha that we said that he went back lekado. What is levado? Levado lekado for his jugs. what? He forgot jugs on the other side. That jugs was what he went to take. And that's what's actually brought down, right? Also, because it says, "Vayivater Yaakov levado, vayaveki shino ad shachar." What does that mean? He forgot pachim ktanim, he forgot small jugs. Says the Tzeidah Derech. HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes and named Marshal. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Yaakov Avinu, you put your life on the line for small jugs. For me, I'm going to pay you back with those jugs in the time of Bnei Chashmonai. And during the times of Chashmonaim, they're going to come and they're going to give you back, right, those jugs. So therefore, you see from here something incredible. First of all, Galut Yavan is the third exile. We said that the third exile, we're going to be redeemed through the Zechut of Yaakov Avinu. The first one was Abraham. Second one, Yitzhak. Third one, Yaakov. Last one was Moshe. So Yaakov is parallel in correlation to Yavan, to the Greeks, right? Which is the Greek ideology in the Greeks. Now we have also that in the Zechut of Yaakov Avinu, we had the jugs of oil for the Chashmonaim. And all the miracles that happened through these jugs was because he put his Mesirut Nefesh into it. So it's going to bring us miracles. Now we're going to go to the next part, the Megaleh Amukot. Megaleh Amukot comes and he says something incredible. He says, you know that Yerovam ben Nevat, he was the king during the time of Rehovam after Shlomo HaMelech. We know that we had Shaul HaMelech. After Shaul was David HaMelech. After David was Shlomo HaMelech. And after Shlomo was Rehovam. Rehovam, the son of Shlomo, he didn't listen to the elders. And since he didn't listen to the elders, they split the Malchut. They split the, how do you call this? They split the kingdom, and there was Malchut Israel and Malchut Bet Yehuda or Bet David. So the kings of David HaMelech, which was Rehovam, the son of Shlomo, and Yerovam ben Nevat was of Malchei Israel. Yerovam ben Nevat was a huge Tamil Chacham. When we say huge, he was huge. Okay, but there was one problem. Because of the kavod, he gave up, he sold everything. Because of the kavod, he sold everything that he gave everything over. So what happened? What happened is that Yerovam ben Nevat was going to go into the Bet HaMikdash. And in the Bet HaMikdash, what happened is that only Malchut Bet David could sit down in the Azara. So imagine you come in, you're a king. There's the other king, your competition, right? This king of Malchut Bet David could come, sit down in the Azara, and Yerovam ben Nevat, that he's the king of the majority of Israel. Because remember, they had 10 tribes. Malchut Bet David was Yehuda and Binyamin, and it was hardly anything. And all of a sudden, he has to stand up. What's going on? Because of that, you know what Yerovam did? Yerovam put guards that he didn't allow Malchut Israel to go up to the Bet HaMikdash. And he went and he told all of Israel, they put an egel, that's like the egel hazahav, they put another calf, and they said, this is your God, this is the one that you're serving. You're not going to the Bet HaMikdash. Yerovam ben Nevat came from Yosef Hatzadik. Listen to what's brought down in Megaleh Amukot. Megaleh Amukot comes and he says something so deep, and he says like this. Yerovam ben Nevat comes from Yosef Hatzadik. Antiochus is the same numerical value, the same gematria as Yosef. And it's the same gematria as Melech Yavan. So the king of Greece, which is Antiochus. So Melech Yavan, right, has the numerical value as Yosef. How much is Yosef? Right? Pay attention. Pei is 80. Samech is 60. So that's 140. Yod is 150. Vav is 6, 156. So the numerical value of Yosef, 156. Numerical value of Antiochus, 156. Numerical value of Melech Yavan, the king of Greece, 156. He says, what did they come and they tell us? The Greeks told us, you have to take an ox and you have to write down on Keren Ashor, right on the horn, right, of the ox, En lachem chelek belokei Yisrael. We don't have a portion in the God of Israel. What were they trying to do? You know what the Greeks were trying to do? They were trying to remind Hashem of the sin of Yerovam ben Nevat, that he came from Yosef. Why? They were arousing God of the sins of the Jews. That's what they were doing. Why? He says, because then the sin of Yerovam, that he came out from Yosef, that Yosef was called a shor. Bechor shoro adarlo. It says, we speak about Shimon v'Levi Achim, that they wanted, ubirtzonam yikeru shor, they wanted to uproot the shor. Who's the uproot the shore? They wanted to kill Yosef. Yosef is the shore. He's the ox. He's the one that's, the running, the one of the power, the ox power. What happened is that they wanted to uproot him. Yosef is called Bechor Shoro Adalo V'Karnei Rehem Karnav Bahem. I mean, in Parashat Vezot HaBracha, on Yosef Hatzadik, it's written about the shore. So what happened? The Greeks wanted to remind Hashem of the sin of Yerovam ben Nevat that he came from Yosef Hatzadik. How? They come and they say, take the shore, right, and write on the shore that you don't have a chelik in the God of Israel. And that's exactly what Yerovam ben Nevat did. So that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to awaken, right, this concept. So now what happens? Hanuka, though, is actually in the merit of Yosef Hatzadik. How do we see this exactly, right? So first of all, there's a sefer called the Mevaser Tov. The Mevaser Tov comes and he says as follows. He says, all mitzinu we found also to do with Yosef Hatzadik. He says like this, we find in the Sfarim Kedoshim, Yosef is Gematria Melech Yavan, and the kavanah is that only because of Yosef Tzadik Yesod Olam, we are able to annul Malchut Yavan Aresha. That means, we said before, there was a connection between Yaakov, that since Yaakov Avinu was a third of the forefathers, the third galut, the third exile, which was going to be Galut Yavan, we were redeemed in the merit of Yaakov Avinu. And then we brought down about the Pach HaShemen, about the oils, that Yaakov Avinu went back for the jugs of oil. Those jugs of oil were the oils that they found in the Chashmonaim. Those were the jugs of oil that they used for the anointing of the kings, of the anointing of the Bet HaMikdash, and v'chule, v'chule, v'chule. Look how many other things you had just because of these jugs of oil. Now all of a sudden we see that the Hanuka is the Yesod of Yosef Hatzadik. So we have to understand, where do we see such a thing? So interestingly enough, first of all, there's a pasuk in Parashat Miketz, in next week's parasha, that says, Vayad Yosef itam and Binyamin. Yosef comes and he sees that Binyamin are with the brothers. So he comes and he tells the person which is in charge of his house, which is his son, he comes and he tells him, he says, right, Avet anashim abayta, bring them home. Utvoach tevach ve'achen. Do slaughtering, make up, and prepare. But they're going to eat with me. If you take the word utvoach tevach ve'achen, utvoach has the letter chet at the end. Chet. Ve'achen, to prepare. Ve'achen, vav, hey, chaf, nun, Hanuka. So therefore the chet of Hanuka, chet days of Hanuka, the 8 days of Hanuka, from here we learn that he was telling them, we're going to prepare a meal because it's Hanukkah. So we're going to eat together. So he comes and he tells the one in charge of his house, come, prepare a meal because we're going to eat together. That's the inyan of having a seudah on Hanukkah. Even though there's a Maram Rotumu that he wants to say that there's no real mitzvah of having a seudah, but it's still seudat reshut, but there's still a mitzvah to come, to eat a little bit, to say divrei Torah, shiro v'tishpachot, and singing, and then all of a sudden you're going to have even more. But that's where it comes from, the concept of utvoach tevach ve'achen. Who brings this down? The Shiltei HaGiborim. The Shiltei HaGiborim, one of the Rishonim already, at the back of Masechet Shabbat, right? He comes and he says, utvoach tevach ve'achen, hachem mitvoach ve'ateva min ve'achen, hem otiyot Chanukah, ve'smach le'seudot she'osim beChanukah. This is a proof to the entire concept of that we do seudot for Chanukah. So therefore we do seudot for Hanukkah. That's what we do. We make seudot. Okay? Fine. Now he comes and we brought down the Shla Kadosh. But the Shla Kadosh already came and he said this. So now we're going to find out, and now we're going to delve a little bit deeper to understand the 4 galuyot, right? The 4 malchuyot, basically. That remember, we were Babylonia. The Babylonians destroyed the first temple, the first Bet HaMikdash, and we went to Galut Bavel. Afterwards, it changed to Galut of Pras, of the Persians. Right, Prasumadai. That was with how do you call this? With Antiochus and everything. Right, that's what happened. That's what, not Antiochus, Achashverosh. Sorry, with Esther. That was during the Persians. Afterwards, it was Galut Yavan, that we were under the Greeks. That was 200 years before the end of the Second Temple. And then afterwards was Galut Edom. Edom was the Romans that they destroyed the second Bet HaMikdash. And then, right, we were still in that exile. Even though I told you already, there's a concept of Galut Ishmael, which we're not going to go into today. So basically, there's a Maharal. Maharal is the Maharal mi Prague. right, from Czechoslovakia, the Prague. You can still go to the Altnoi Shul, the Bet Knesset of Prague, right? He was the famous one with the golem. This is the Prague. So the Maran Prague comes and he says like this. Listen to this. We are trying to connect the concept of Yaakov Avinu with the Greeks. What is the connection between them? Why do we say that in the merit of Yaakov Avinu, we're going to be redeemed from the Greeks? What's going on exactly? And he says like this, Uve Midrash Even, right? The Midrash says that Even is Yaakov Avinu. Tichtiv Misham Roeh Even Yisrael. From there, we're going to see Even Yisrael. Yisrael is an Even. Who's Yisrael? Yaakov Avinu. Upirush Zeh. And the explanation is, Ki legodel hakoach sheyeshadal malchuyot elu. These four kingdoms are so powerful that he gave them the strength of human beings. It was only Yaakov that was able to destroy it. But it's very deep. Because he's holy and he's separated. Just like we explained somewhere else, Yaakov hu kadosh bifrat. As it's always known, and that's what we say, Vigdishu et kedosh Yaakov ve'et Elohei Yisrael. What does that mean? Yaakov Avinu was always the one that represented Kiddusha. Yaakov Avinu was the one that always represented holiness. We know that Yaakov Avinu, he went and he was able to say, Reshit, right? Kochi v'reshit Reuven bechor yata. You're my bechor. Reshit kochi doni. You are the first of my strength. What does that mean? At the time that he got married, he was 84 years old. And it was the first time that he had zera, the semen that came out of him, and of Yaakov Avinu, and it went to make a child. The reason why we say that is very, very simple. When did the brothers receive the brachot? Yaakov and Esav received the brachot at the age of 63. At that time, at the age of 63, he had to run away. He was 14 years in the Yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever until 77. 63 and 14 is 77. He worked 7 years for Rachel, and then he got married at the age of 77, and 7 is 84. At 84 is when he got married to Rachel, which happened to be Leah, right? So because again, the switch. And then he had to work another 7 years, but he got Rachel immediately because he got married to Leah. After the Sheva Brachot, immediately got married to Rachel, and then he had to work another 7 years for Rachel, Keilu. You know, that's what happened. But he was 84. At the age of 84, he went and he said, which means that he was such of a holiness that he was separated from everything of holiness. What was the Greeks exactly? Right? So here, by the way, he brings down, Ma'alat Yaakov Avinu was always Kiddusha. Well, that's why we say, Ata Kadosh v'Shimcha Kadosh, U'Kdoshim Echol Yom V'Chesela. The first bracha of the Amidah is Chesed. What is that? Birkat Avot Magen Avraham. The second one is Mechayem Etim, Gvura, Yitzchak Avinu. Who was the one that was Mechayem Etim? Yitzchak. He died at that kid and he came back to life. That's Keneged Yitzchak. Who is the one of Ata Kadosh v'Shimcha Kadosh of Kiddusha? Holiness? Yaakov Avinu. It's Yaakov. And that's why also if you pay attention, right, it's always to do with Kiddusha on Yaakov Avinu, also on Yamim Nonaim. Right, Vigdishu et Kedosh Yaakov. Kiddusha is always Yaakov Avinu. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, that he was like Yaakov Avinu in that sense. We actually brought down, if you remember, that there was a connection between Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and Yaakov Avinu, because Yaakov Avinu was always the one that was the koach of the Torah. He was the one that took the Torah. He was the power of the Torah. Yitzchak was Gvura, Abraham was Chesed, Yaakov Avinu was Titen Emel Yaakov, it was Emet and Torah, because the Torah is Torah Temet. What happened is that Rabbeinu Yehuda Nasi, he never touched from beneath his stomach downwards. He never saw his Brit Milah. He never touched, even to wipe himself, nothing. It was Kiddusha, he was 100% holy. And that's why he was able, when he passed away, to say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? There was such a Kiddusha in this person. It was something that's not normal, but this is the Kiddusha of Yaakov Avinu. If you actually pay attention, right, and this is actually brought down also in the Gemara, Chidushei Agadot for Zvachim, he says, Yaakov Yakadosh v'nidab yoter mikol ha'avot, right, even more than all the other forefathers. That's what's brought down in the Maharal in many different places. So here in the footnote, he actually brings it down in many different places. Now let's go back to what we were speaking about. There's a beautiful Sfat Emet. Listen to this Sfat Emet. The Sfat Emet, that Admor Migur comes and he says something incredible, right? Hold on to your chairs so we don't fall down, right? But listen to this. He comes and he says like this: the Dalet Malchuyot are bechinat avodah zarah, gilui arayot, shvichut damim, and lashon hara keneged kulam. We have 4 Malchuyot. There are 3 cardinal sins, the capital sins, and then you have what's called, right, the lashon hara keneged kulam. Okay? One second. So basically, the Sfat Emet, the Admor Migur comes and he says as follows. He says there are 3 cardinal sins: avodah zarah, serving idols; gilui arayot, immorality; shvichut damim, murder; velashon hara keneged kulam. Lashon hara is worse than everything. Velachen, and therefore, the Gimel Avot amdu ala Gimel Averot shehem shekulin kechol haTorah umchoyavin lemsirut nefesh alehem. The 3 Avot HaKadoshim, Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov, they came and they had to fix up. What did they fix up? Each one fixed up. Avraham Avinu fixed avodah zarah. When in his generation they were doing avodah zarah, what did he do? He took the hammer and boom, smashes all the avodah zarah. He fixed up the avodah zarah. What did Yitzchak Avinu do? Shvichut damim, murder, because he was actually ki'ilu that he died and he came back alive. That was the shvichut damim. Yaakov Avinu was the concept of immorality, immoral relations. So he comes and he says, Yaakov Avinu kolel gimel avot, aval kol gimel atzarot. He had all of them. V'utzach liot im Lavan. Lavan is avodah zarah. Lavan was full of avodah zarah everywhere where he went. Shekatuv nichashti trafimu. Ve'esav was shvichut damim. Esav wanted to kill him. Ve'dina was gilui arayot. So Yaakov Avinu had to actually pass through all 3 of them. He had to go through the avodah zarah, he had to go through the shvichut damim, and he had to go through also the concept of gilui arayot. Gimel Malchuyot, and that's why you had the Gimel Malchuyot. Babylonia was everything avodah zarah. Babylonia, the semel, their concept, their ideology was idolatry. Avodah zarah. He says Madai was murder. Lashmi la'arog u'la'abed. When it came with the Man Rasha and Achashverosh, was always murder, to kill people. He says Yavan was Gilui Arayot. The Greeks was immorality. Why? Do you know the entire concept of the Greeks was the body? They worshipped their bodies. Everything that happened, promiscuity, of immorality, of everything, everything was, their body was everything. Sports, everything had to do with what? The Greeks. Why did it start the sports with Greeks? Because they wanted to make sure that their body was so powerful, was so good looking, was so this. What happened? Everything was the Greeks. So therefore, Yaakov Avinu had to come and he had to actually destroy this power of the immorality. And therefore, how does he destroy it? Only with Kedusha. So it says here, Malchut HaRevi'it, which is Edom, which is the Romans, is Lashon Hara v'Sinat Chinam, Sheshakul neged Gimel Averot, which is equal to all the Averot. It's a Gemara Mesechet Yoma, Taftet Amud Bet. Right? Look it up. Mesechet Yoma, Talmud Bavli, Yoma, which is speaking about Yom Kippur. Taftet Amud Bet, 9b. It says over there that Lashon Hara and Sinat Chinam is equal to the other 3 cardinal sins. So he says, V'lachen, and therefore that's why Edom, the Romans, is the worst of all the Malchuyot. It's worst of all of the things. And that's why we're still there until today. The Ashvatim im Yosef was already the preparation for this galut. Because of Yosef and the brothers that they started speaking Lashon Hara about each other, and they started saying, so that's what already was a preparation for this exile. And therefore it comes out the Remez of Lashon Hara v'Sinat Chinam. And that's why it says Bamidrash, Kershiratzita natata belibam lisno, klomar shaya kol mechuvam megzirat alyon. In order that we're going to have a galut. So now he's going to come, and now that we just mentioned that, now we're going to bring down another incredible concept, which is about Adam and Ishon. Adam and Ishon, it says like this, the koach of Yaakov Avinu was to do with Kiddusha. Remember the Yaakov Avinu, until the age of 84, he didn't get married. And the first time that he lived with his wife, he was able to see Kochi v'reshitoni, right? That Reuven, you're my first strength. Everything that I was able to give over. He had Kiddusha. There was no immorality. There was nothing of immoral thoughts. Everything was 100% of Kiddusha. That was the koach of Yaakov Avinu and also of Yosef Hatzadik. And that's what we're going to explain right now. Yaakov Avinu nityacher binyanei kedushato, as it says in the Torah, Reshit Oni. Yaakov היה לו כוח, והקדישו את קדוש יעקב. Every time that we mention kedusha, holiness, sanctity, it's Yaakov Avinu. And therefore he comes and he says, Titenem el Yaakov, because the Brit Milah is all connected to the Torah Temet. It's all connected to kedusha, to holiness. So the Zohar HaKadosh comes and he says, Adam HaRishon, when he sinned, in the sin of Adam HaRishon, you had the 3 cardinal sins as well. Meaning we think that he took an apple, or whatever it was exactly, right? There's a machloket what it was exactly. He took it and he ate it. And that was a sin. He says, no. Says the Zohar HaKadosh, in the sin of Adam HaRishon, you had 3 sins. The sin of Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayot, and Shvichut Damim. He says, why? And therefore, the Shalosh Avot, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov had to come, and they had to fix the Pagam of Adam HaRishon. They had to fix the defect of Adam HaRishon. So the Zohar comes and he explains that Abraham Avinu was the one that fixed Avodah Zarah. Yitzchak fixed Shvichut Damim, and Yaakov Avinu fixed the concept of Gilui Arayot. So now he comes and he says, it's there, right? So he comes and he says this. From the Zohar HaKadosh, you see that Yaakov Avinu had the Koch HaKedusha, and that's how he was able to fix up the sin of Adam HaRishon. Now he actually comes and he says, that's why we actually understand, right, this concept of Yosef Hatzadik. Yosef Hatzadik, why do we call him Tzadik? Do you think about it? Out of all, we don't hear Binyamin Hatzadik, Reuven Hatzadik, Levi Hatzadik. From Levi comes Moshe, Aaron. No, Noach was Ish Tzadik. But we don't find a person called Yosef Hatzadik. Not even Yaakov was called Yaakov Hatzadik. See, what is this exactly? So he comes and he says, right, like this. He comes and he says that the koch of the Tumah of Yavan, right, was very, very powerful. As we already actually brought down. The koch of the Tumah was, they wanted that there should always be impurity. How do you know they wanted impurity? What did they do? They went into the Bet HaMikdash and they impurified all the oil. They wanted to make everything tameh. They wanted to make sure that they went and they wanted to violate all the Jewish women. They didn't want them to become pure. They wanted to do all the things that there's no kedusha. What else did they want to do? No Brit Milah. You guys are realizing, one more time, Yaakov Avinu was born with a Brit Milah already done. He was Koach HaKedusha, Koach of the Torah. They didn't want to let us learn Torah. They didn't want us to do Brit Milah. They didn't want anything to do with purity, family purity, right? They didn't want any. Do you realize what's going on? Everything's all connected. They're all there. It's all the exact same thing. So that's what the Or HaChaim HaKadosh actually is understanding, right? By coming and actually saying this thing. So therefore, they come and they say, right, as follows. The Gemara says, right, that Yosef Hatzadik was called Tzadik Yesod Olam. Why was he called Tzadik Yesod Olam exactly? Why is the Yosef Hatzadik called Tzadik Yesod Olam? So he comes and he says the reason why is because he watched over his Brit Milah. He watched over his Brit Milah. You want to become holy? You want to become a tzaddik? You have to be careful with your Brit Milah. You have to be very, very cautious. Why? Because only when a person does such a thing, they have kedusha. Only when they watch over that. And that's why it's so holy. He was called Tzaddik Yesod Olam. And he explains why. It says over here like this. He says, right, there's a pasuk, right, when we're talking about the entire concept of, right, Yaakov Avinu and Yosef Hatzadik, right, that they were nefesh achat. What does that mean exactly, they were nefesh achat? They were all one. But what does that mean, all one? So they say that Yosef Hatzadik was put in the biggest test. Do you know what it is to have that the wife of his master is every single time trying to do an avirah with him? She never wore the same clothing, morning, afternoon, or evening. Nowadays, sometimes women have this, that they can't wear the same thing to another party, right? But okay, but if it's not a party, so they'll still wear the same clothing to one thing, to another thing. He was living in the house, which means that there's no such thing that, she could repeat and he doesn't realize. You understand? She never wore the same clothing, morning, afternoon, and every single time was something new. She wanted to draw his eyes. Yosef Hatzadik never put his eyes to her. You know what he did? What she did? She put around his neck a type of like a band, right, around the neck that had like little thorns. And if he would put his head down, it would cut him. And he still did it. And they went and the people, they were saying, what's wrong with her? What's wrong with this woman? So she went and she wanted to show everybody who was Yosef Hatzadik? You know what she did? She called all the women over, right? She called them all over, and they were in the kitchen and they're cutting vegetables. And all of a sudden she went and she called Yosef to come in and to get something. Yosef came in. When he came in, all the women started looking at him, and they went and they continued cutting. They were cutting their fingers, right? So when their fingers were all cut, she comes and she tells them, okay, thank you very, very much. Bye-bye. He left. She looks at them and she goes, why is there blood all over? What's going on over exactly? Right? They were so much looking at him because Yosef was so handsome that they went and they cut themselves. So she went and she told them, now you understand why I'm going crazy? Now you understand what's still happening? But Yosef never did the Avirah. Because he went and he watched himself from doing the Avirah, he was nicknamed Yosef Hatzadik, and only in that power of Yosef Hatzadik are we able to win against Yavan. We're able to win, right, against the Greeks, only because of that power, because of Yosef Hatzadik. So that's why he comes and he says over here, now we understand, right, about Yosef. Yosef was a continuation of Yaakov Avinu. They were nefesh achad, they were the same. Yaakov started off that because of his merit, we were able to win against the Greeks, because he was kadosh, he was holy. So too Yosef was a continuation of Yaakov. And because of his holiness of Yosef at Tzaddik, that he was a Tzaddik, we were able to overwin, we were able to overcome Malchut Yavan. And I think that's why it's so incredible just to understand the connection now that we actually say between Yosef and Yaakov and Hanuka. Just like we started off by saying that the Greeks, we were redeemed because of Yaakov, 1 minute, right? Or because of what we mentioned, right? The entire concept that Yaakov Avinu went back, right? Where did he go back? Vayivater Yaakov levado. What is levado? Al tikre levado ela lekado. He went back for small jugs. That small jugs was the jugs that were going to be found by the Chashmonaim later on, because he did Mesiru Nefesh to go back to find these small jugs of oil, right? 1 second. So therefore he comes and he says, that's why it's so important to understand the connection, right, between these two different